If not, Ms. Tachover, we have you, and we have two gentlemen at the table. I'm not sure who they are. If they would, please identify themselves.
Thank you. Is it okay that I'm sitting here, or should I sit?
Oh, no, you're good, Tina.
Are you okay? Can you hear me? Okay, hi. So thank you for everyone for having me today. My name is Dafna Tachover, and I'm the founder of an organization called We Are the Evidence. We are an organization that represents the many adults and unfortunately many children who have become very sick from wireless technology radiation. And with me here today, I have Professor Paul Aru. Professor Aru is a physicist and a toxicologist. He used to work for the industry on the health effects of electromagnetic fields and radiation until he understood the harms associated with this technology. Then he expanded his medical knowledge and became a toxicologist, and now he's a professor in a medical school of McGill University in Canada, teaching courses about the health effects of electromagnetic fields and radiation. To my left here is Dr. James Zarbron. Dr. James Zarbron is actually a doctor in the state of Michigan. And after he heard that I'm here, he contacted me because he has seen an epidemic of sickness in his clinic from wireless technology radiation. And the funny thing is that, while people are getting sick, they go to a doctor. Unfortunately, what's really going on now, doctors like Dr. Zarbron actually refer them back to engineers because they have to go to their home and disable the wireless devices in order for these people to get better. And once these wireless devices are being disabled, they are getting better. And again, we're not talking about a small group of people with some kind of odd responses, abnormal responses to this technology. Please remember, we are electric beings. Our brain is electric. Our nervous system is electric. Our heart is electric. Our cells communicate electrically. So the question is not how come this technology and radiation can affect us. The question is how can it not affect us? Now, I want to share with you a little bit how I started with this. So actually, I'm an attorney in New York and in Israel. And I actually have a telecommunication background. I was a telecommunication and computer officer in the Israeli army. I managed the computer and telecommunication center of the Israeli Operations Center and headquarters. So wireless technology was my profession. I was an early adopter and avid user of this technology until it made me sick. In 2009, I moved to Princeton. My ex-husband is an MD, he has a PhD in molecular biology, and he got a job at the university. I thought it's time to start a family. And I decided to start my own law practice, and very happily, I went to buy a new laptop. And weird things started to happen when I was getting that laptop. I started get tingling in my finger, tingling in my feet. My heart became uncomfortable. I ended up changing 5 laptops in 3 weeks, and with every laptop I was getting, I would get more and more symptoms. Then I could not suddenly use my cell phone. Every time I would use my cell phone, I get a very sharp pain in my brain. It became very clear that what's affecting me was the wireless radiation in these devices. So long story short, I basically became, within 6 months, completely dysfunctional. I could not be anywhere with wireless radiation, and that means everywhere. So I ended up living in my car, and I can assure you, living in my car was never on my life plan. And I divorced my ex-husband, and I understood that in order to get better, I have to remove myself from this environment. And I ended up living in the Catskills in an isolated cabin for 4 years, not knowing how I can get better and if I'll get better. Now, when something that you used to love so much can destroy your life to such an extent, you want to understand how come you never heard anything about it. The truth is, I did hear something about it. 6 months before I got sick, my ex-husband, who is a pretty smart guy, saw me on the cell phone all the time, and he said, Dafna, maybe you want to take breaks between calls. And I remember that scene, and I looked at him, and I was smiling. I said nothing, and I just thought in my head, worst case scenario, I get a brain tumor when I'm 70 or 80. Everything causes cancer. Now, I think everyone here had the same thought in their head at one time or another. But what the thing is, in that moment of time, I made a risk-benefit analysis. But the thing is, I made a risk-benefit analysis without actually knowing the risks. Now, as Senator Colbeck said, it's your duty to protect the health and safety of the people of Michigan. So I do hope that before you're going to vote on this bill, you actually make a proper risk analysis. Now, they mentioned the economic benefits of this 5G bill, and I can show you that there are actually not too many of them. But if you're looking at economic benefit, I think we all should actually go and check what's the healthcare costs that we are carrying right now from this technology and from the adverse health effects of this technology. While the wireless industry is making tons of money, it is the state and the people who are paying for the healthcare costs. Now, if you want to understand the extent of the sickness, I'll give you some data. So at least 10% of the population already suffering from symptoms which are now called microwave sickness, which is what I'm suffering from. 10%, and that was based on surveys that were done up to 2006. 2006, that is before Wi-Fi, that is before smartphone, that is before the outrageous smart meters. That is essentially before the exponential increase in our exposure to wireless radiation in the places we live. Let's talk about cancer. So one of the wireless industry people here mentioned that he's from Indiana. This week, the wife of the ex-governor of Indiana was diagnosed with glioblastoma. Same brain tumor Ted Kennedy had and John McCain had. Did you look at John McCain's car? This is a cell phone brain tumor. LeBron James, one of our sports people, had a salivary gland tumor. That is another cell phone tumor. You didn't hear about it because immediately after that was discovered, he was paid by Samsung to become their spokesperson. Now, the 4 top diseases that kill our children, our young adults right now, are brain tumors, thyroid cancer, testis cancer, rectal cancer, everywhere we put our cell phones. Breast cancer. We suddenly have breast cancer in women who have no DNA predisposition to have breast tumor. And funny enough, they had a very odd distribution of their tumors. They usually resemble the shape of the cell phone, the way they used to put the cell phone in a bra. Reproductive harm. There is a significant decrease in the quality of sperm in male in the past 10 to 15 years. There are dozens and dozens of studies that show beyond any doubt what this radiation is doing to our sperm. Now, for example, there's a study from Israel. They took 106 male who 50% put the cell phone in a pocket, 50 did not. Those who did not put the cell phone in a pocket had a 12% bad sperm. Those who did put the cell phone, and that's normal, those who did put the cell phone in a pocket had a 47% bad sperm. Now, if you take the cell phone out of your pocket, the sperm will recuperate within 3 to 4 months. What would not recuperate would be the damage to the DNA of the sperm. That is irreparable. Let's talk about autism. In the past 10 years, we had the rates of autism tripled. There's a study that was done by Professor Martha Herbert from Harvard University, MD, PhD. She's one of the world's biggest experts on autism. In 2013, she decided to check whether there's possible correlation between this radiation and autism. She thought she was going to have a short paper, a few citations. She ended up with a 60-page paper with 550 references. Now, there was no one study that showed, yes, this radiation is causing autism. I'm sorry, just a moment. But there was a study that showed what people with autism have, and a study that showed what this radiation is causing to our brain, and there were a lot of similarities. She concluded, yes, a correlation is possible. And now when children are coming to her clinic, she tells the parents, remove wireless, and the children are getting better. Later on, you're going to get a package from me, and in that package, there's a testimony. A few days ago, I went to Facebook to a group called EMF and Autism. And a mother there put a notice what happened after she removed the wireless from her house. Her autistic child suddenly improved, and after not being willing to touch a pen since the day he was born, now he cannot stop write anywhere and everywhere. I gave a lecture here in one of the towns, and actually an autistic young man at the age of 32 came to my lectures because he wanted me to talk to his mother that he's affected by this radiation. She did come to the lecture. She got convinced. They removed the Wi-Fi from his environment. Within 3 days, his nosebleed stopped. His brain works much better. He feels much better. And now he thinks that he can go to university and he plans to do so. So we have scientific evidence. We have human evidence, but we were ignoring it. Let's talk about ADHD. ADHD more than doubled in the past 10 years. So there's Professor Hugh Tyler from Yale University. He is the head of their OBGYN department. And he conducted a study on mice. He exposed the mice to this radiation when the mice were pregnant. When the mice baby was born, they actually had a different brain, and they manifested the same symptom manifested by adults and children with ADHD. Recently, a summary of 5 study on 83,000 women showed that when these women were exposed to this radiation, the women who were exposed to this higher level of radiation had higher rates of children with ADHD, with basically behavioral and attention deficit disorders. So all of this info and data is from the past 10 to 15 years. Let's think, not only this data supports directly that this radiation is causing. Think about it, what changed in our environment most significantly in the past 10 to 15 years. So the thing is, we've been looking the other way. The data, the science is conclusive, and we're talking about 10,000 studies that prove the harms of this technology beyond any doubt. But we do studies in order to warn us as what will happen to humans. But we now have the human evidence, and it is clear and conclusive, but we ignore that as well. Well, so one evidence that we now cannot ignore anymore, that's the NTP study that Senator Colbeck mentioned. So in 1999, and there's a long story into it, I'm not sure can get to it later. In 1999, the federal government, in 1993, the CTIA, the Wireless Industry Lobby Association, after it was sued for the brain tumor, for a brain tumor that a man sued that, for a brain tumor that killed his wife, in 1993 the wireless industry said, okay, you know what, we're going to learn this topic. We put $25 million into studying this topic. Now, what do you think can happen to those studies? Nothing. Nothing came out of them. I would not tell you who they chose to handle those studies. Anyway, so after nothing came out of it, in 1999 the FDA said, you know what? We will do a study. We will give $25 million to conduct a study that will give us a final answer whether or not this radiation is actually harmful. It was a 14-year study, and that study was designed perfectly to make sure that it cannot be challenged, that there will not be any doubt. That's why it took them 14 years. And in 2016, the partial report of this study came out, and the conclusion was this radiation causing brain tumors, heart tumors, and DNA damage. Now, the head of Dr. Ron Melnick, who led this study for most of his year, he said that while our hypothesis was that this radiation cannot cause cancer, our hypothesis was proven false. This radiation definitely caused cancer. And as for DNA damage, the same thing. We clear evidence that this radiation is causing DNA damage.
Ms. Tachover, may I interrupt?
Yes.
FDA, Food and Drug Administration, United States government?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And they gave the money to the NTP, that's a National Toxicology Program, which is part of the NIEHS, the National Institute of Environmental and Health Sciences, and they have been conducting the study. Now, in 2018, the final reports were issued, and that was like before final report, and that was in February this year. Now, every scientific study is supposed to go through a process of peer review. So the NIEHS appointed an 11 expert panel to review the study. They came out with a final answer on March 28, and their conclusion, clear evidence of cancer. So there are no more maybes. This is the study that was supposed to give us a final answer. Final answer is carcinogenic effect. So actually, we should not be sitting here and thinking whether or not we're going to give the wireless industry a corrupt and fraudulent industry. And I'm telling this as an attorney who knows the evidence, and I know the evidence in and out. And a lot of their evading questions, I can clarify those, evading answer for you on a legal basis. But, you want to give this industry unlimited access to our public right-of-way to put cell towers that are going to be put in the same height of our second floor bedrooms. And if you look at this page that I asked to give you, I don't know if you have it, the second picture, that is show neurological problems associated with radiation from cell towers up to 400 meters. And you can clearly see that the closer you are to the cell tower, the higher of neurological problem you have. And these antennas will be put directly outside of your children's bedrooms. So we should not be sitting and thinking if you're going to give this industry unlimited access to our public rights of way. We should instead, when we finally admitted that cigarettes are causing cancer, we labeled cigarettes. Warning, we put warning on the cigarettes. We banned smoking from public areas. So this is really what we should be doing here. The legislator should pass legislation to protect the health of the people. So right now we should be sitting here and proposing legislation to warn the public, to inform the public, because this wireless industry has put billions and billions of dollars in the past 30 years to mislead the public as to the health effects and keep the public uninformed. So we should legislate the health effect. We should make sure every person in the state of Michigan know about this harm. All of those people who had smart meters, a LED smart meter, forced on them on their home should be informed that this radiation from those meters can cause them cancer and DNA damage. And they should have the right to demand the removal of those meters. We should remove Wi-Fi from schools, and I'll say a word about the Wi-Fi from schools. When I got sick and I learned that they're putting Wi-Fi in the schools in Israel, I was very sick at the time, but I could not tolerate the thought that children in the schools will become as sick as I have. And I had no way, I didn't know how I'd do it, but I decided to fight the Israeli government on this, because I did not want my nieces to become sick. And after a few months of correspondence, I submitted a Supreme Court case in Israel to ban the use of Wi-Fi in the schools and replace them with wired network. Now, I'm not against technology. I'm in favor of safe technologies. And let's make it clear, there are numerous ways to make this technology safer. The wireless industry knows that. For example, and I can explain, there's something called modulation. Modulation found to be the most harmful element of wireless technology. Now, instead of improving the modulation and making it safer, the wireless industry uses it to manipulate the science. When they conduct and fund science studies, they remove the modulation from the study. This is how they use the knowledge they have to continue and harm the public. So when we had a case in Israel, I had no doubt that we're going to find an epidemic of sickness, and we have, and we did. We showed over 206 children, and that was in just 6 schools that we checked. And we did not even check all the schools. The top 5 symptoms were headaches, nosebleeds, cognitive problem, exhaustion, and nausea. Cognitive problem, for example, numerous parents were getting calls from their teacher, even of gifted children. Suddenly the parents telling them that the children cannot follow up what's going on in a class. And I'm using this example a lot. I had a first grade girl who was just before starting school, they told her that she's actually advanced her age. One day she comes back from schools and tells her mother, "I'm stupid." And the mother asked, "Why are you stupid?" And she said, "Because I cannot understand what the teacher is talking about in the class." And then she said that she had a lot of tingling feeling she feels like an ant walking on her head. So, and again, I can tell you stories from now to tomorrow, including in the state of Michigan. And in the package that I left you, there's a story of a family, a father who is a truck driver from Michigan, testimony about how his 12-year-old daughter is extremely sick from wireless radiation. And they didn't know this for years. The moment they removed the Wi-Fi, this girl immediately improved. And a lot of our children are sick, and they're being misdiagnosed and mistreated because the wireless industry is keeping us and our doctors misinformed. Now, we cannot not make the comparison to what happened with the tobacco industry. Actually, the wireless industry has been following the tobacco industry and perfected it, and I'll talk about it in a second. They probably conducted what I believe to be the biggest fraud on the public ever conducted. And again, every word I'm saying, I'm willing and can prove. I'm an attorney. I would not say things I cannot prove, and there are tons of documents to prove everything I'm saying. Now, back to the schools. As a result of the case, in Israel, they put limitation of the use of Wi-Fi in the schools. And now, last year, actually, Cyprus banned Wi-Fi in schools completely. Now, in the US, the only state that conducted a review of the issue, that is Maryland. They have an advisory board appointed by the governor on the issue of health and safety of children. They conducted a hearing, a long hearing. They heard expert. I gave testimony. And as a result, in December 2000, I think it was 2016, they came out with a report that say Wi-Fi should not be used in school. We should put wired network. And we should limit the exposure of our children to this radiation. They had 4 doctors on the panel. This is when this data is being reviewed by professionals, the results are conclusive. The biggest review of the science of this topic was done by what's called the Bioinitiative report. That is a report prepared by 30 leading scientists and public health officials on this issue worldwide. After reviewing 1,800 studies on wireless radiation, they concluded this radiation, including radiation from cell towers, Wi-Fi, cell phones, smart meters, cause bioeffects within minutes of exposure. We are all affected, whether or not we feel it, and this is causing a lot of adverse effects in our body. How can it not? So, I mentioned that this is a fraud, and I want to, and there were a few questions here from you about whether or not people who got sick will be able to address it and try and remove cell towers. So in 1993, after the first lawsuit, the wireless industry was in problem. Because while we did not learn from what happened with the tobacco industry, the one industry did learn, and that was the insurance industry. I'm sure that many of you do not know that the wireless industry is not insured. It is self-insured. Now, it is not insured because the insurance companies know that if they insure and if the harms are being proven, they're going to go bankrupt, just like has happened, almost happened with asbestos and tobacco. So the wireless industry has to make sure that it's not going to be sued. And it's created a brilliant legal infrastructure to make this happen. So you asked before about legislation. So I'll answer that. So in 1993, after this first lawsuit, they said, put money, $25 million, nothing came out of it. The other thing they did was they started to lobby to take the right to legislate the health effects from our health agencies, from the EPA and from the FDA, and give it to the FCC, because the FCC is a capture agency. And there's a 2015 report by Harvard University, and the whole chapter is dedicated to how the wireless industry is controlling the FCC. And the numerous examples, for example, the previous chairman of the FCC is Tom Wheeler. He was the head of the Wireless Lobby Association for 14 years. Now remember, Obama told us there would be no lobbyists in his administration, so he took the biggest lobby and put him as a head of the FCC. The current FCC chairman, that's Ajit Pai, Verizon attorney. And I can go on and on. The current CTIA, head of the CTIA, is the previous FCC commissioner. So they needed to transfer the...
Dafna,
yes.
can I interrupt you?
Yes.
We've got some members who'd like to ask you questions in the middle of your testimony. Is that okay?
Yes.
First on the list, Representative LaFave.
Can I have one second? I want to complete that question about how the legal issue was, is that okay?
Go ahead, and then
Thank you.
let me know when you're ready for questions.
What happened was, in 1993, the FCC started a rulemaking to adopt the IEEE regulations on this issue. IEEE is an engineer association. Why is it that we adopt regulation of engineers who maybe know how to measure this radiation when it's passing a wall, but not when it's passing a body? All our health agencies objected it, saying that it makes no sense to adopt engineer association that they had not even one biomedical person on their team, and that they ignored all of those studies that shows adverse health effects from these levels of radiation. Then Section 704 was passed in 1996. That was a wireless industry lobbied legislation. This is how our rights in regards to health were taken away by the wireless industry. What this legislation did, it gave the power to regulate the health effects of wireless technology to the FCC. FCC is a spectrum auctioning agency. It's not a health agency. They don't even have one biomedical person on their team. But this is the agency that regulates this. And they adopted the IEEE guideline, despite, at the time, we had over 5,000 studies proving the harms of this technology. And then the other thing that Section 704 did, it actually took the power from the states to regulate location of cell towers based on health. And what does it mean? It means that if they want to put a cell tower in front of your home, you cannot go to your city council and say, hey, stop, I don't want it. I just heard in a lecture that there are 10,000 studies proving that it's harmful. I don't want it. My child is sick. They would tell you, stop. You're not allowed to mention this in the city council. Because Section 704 says that if you will, and if the application will be rejected, the city will be sued, can be sued by the wireless industry. And dozens of our municipalities have been sued for basically talking about health in those city council meetings against cell towers. This is a violation of First Right Amendment under our Constitution. Now, not only that, it's punishing speech because they can be sued, the city can be sued because you talked about health. That's what the wireless industry did. That's how they prevented discussion of health. And why do they want to prevent discussion of health if there's no problem with health?
Dafna, I'm going to interrupt you. And
Yes.
Representative
yes,
Lefebvre,
please.
do you want to ask yours now? Or
Yes,
yield? Okay, Representative Houck has a question right now.
yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could explain, you said the Wi-Fi companies are self-insured. I worked for a company for 24 years. We made restaurant equipment. Our company was self-insured. I'm sure there's a lot of companies that are self-insured in the United States. If they figured out a way where customers cannot sue them by being self-insured, are there other companies that are doing that? I mean, the lawsuits in this country are, astronomical sometimes, and I'm sure, so wouldn't every company be self-insured so they couldn't be sued? I guess I wish you'd explain the logic a little bit better for me.
Well, first of all, I think what you should really think about is why is it that they're not insured? It's not that they chose to be self-insured. They actually rejected by the insurance company from being insured because they understand the risk. And
So
if
the
they
insurance
understand the
companies,
risk-
the big insurance companies,
So there's
will not
okay.
insure the
So
telecommunication?
there's insurance companies, and then there's what's called secondary insurance companies. Secondary insurance companies are the insurance companies that insure the insurance companies. So in an event, an insurance company, let's say I insure Verizon, and it may not be able to meet the claims, then the secondary insurance company is kicking in.
Like Lloyd's of London.
Sorry?
Like
Yes,
Lloyd's of
exactly.
London.
So two leading one would be Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re. Both told the insurance company not to insure the wireless industry, and this is why they're not insured. And that should give you a hint. Now, this is exactly why they have to prevent a health lawsuit. And how did they prevent lawsuit? That goes back to Section 704. So the next thing that happened with Section 704 is, let's say they put that cell tower in front of
I
your
mean,
home.
not to,
No,
getting
it's
away
like-
from the cell tower. So if someone came up and could credibly show, and they can't go to a jury trial and say
No,
this,
we cannot. So what happens?
you cannot go to any court and you
That is
cannot
right
sue
now
them
the
into
problem,
court.
Sir, the Third Circuit appellate decision. So people who tried to sue for the damage that was caused to them. So the wireless
So
industry.
that's one decision. That appellate court.
that
You
is
can go to
right.
another
No,
appellate court,
so
right?
there's- Exactly. So let me answer, sorry, one answer. Section 704 basically take our right to have redress under federal law. So then you can go and now sue for the damage that was caused to you, and that's under state law. And there's a third appellate court decision that said that you cannot sue for the damage that was caused to you because if you will sue, that will conflict with the intention of Section 704, and that is called conflict preemption. So now people cannot sue for the damage that was caused to them. So they do not have redress under federal law. They do not have redress under state law. So this is how there is no way to sue the wireless industry. That is what the situation, and that is violations of Fifth Amendment due process right. If you don't have redress on a federal law and don't have redress on a state law, you don't have how to sue them. This is how they're protected.
Okay,
now, with this legislation, with the 5G legislation.
Daphne, you need to take a breath.
Sorry.
No, I'm not. No, I guess I wouldn't mind later on maybe having one of the telecoms come up and explain their side of it.
Yep.
But thank you. Thanks for. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Daphne, if you will, when members ask you questions, please let them finish.
Okay.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. I understand. Sorry.
I got a couple of questions for you because I've heard some things that I hadn't heard before. One, a point of clarification. You said earlier in 2006 and prior, 10% of the population suffered some type of symptoms, but your testimony is everybody's affected, even those who are not symptomatic, or is it just a subcategory of the population that you think is affected?
President, I'm sure the doctors will agree. We are electric being, we all affected. So what we see, there was this, with the surveys that were done in terms of how many people are affected, you see a constant increase in the rate of people who are affected. So clearly there's a correlation between how much we are exposed to this to how many people develop this condition. I was using this technology. I was not sick always from it. At one point, I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And you can see, so it's everyone's affected. Some will get electrosensitivity. I did not get cancer. I got electrosensitivity from this. Everyone has their own predisposition, and they'll have different effects. The issue is there are numerous effects that can happen. For example, there are 200 studies that show that this radiation can cause whether this radiation could cause oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is a mechanism that leads to cancer, non-cancer conditions, and DNA damage. Now,
so in your case, your years of service with the Israeli Defense Force, you worked closely with the technology. It had no effect, but at some point in your life, it had a cumulative effect after which exposure has caused negative consequences.
Sometimes you have cumulative, sometimes there's a one event. There are different ways. We are not completely sure, but there's definitely a cumulative effect here, absolutely.
Here's the biggest thing I heard today from Senator Colbeck and then from you, the concept of hardwiring the technology. And, of course, I want to hear from the wireless industry as to whether or not that actually performs the same function for autonomous vehicles, for example. You know, will hardwiring a system be able to power autonomous vehicles? I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll answer, yeah. So when it comes to autonomous vehicles, basically every claim they made in terms of 5G is not correct. They told you that it's rural areas. It's not rural areas. They told you that it will that it's basically going to reduce our download speeds from 8 seconds to 4 seconds, for example. Yes, it will. But is reducing our download speeds from 8 seconds to 4 seconds can actually pay for $200 billion infrastructure per year. And by the way, I put a memory stick in the package you get, and a lot of the stuff I mentioned is referred to there. And there's an article there by Bloomberg saying why this infrastructure is not going towards it. Another thing that is there, essentially, what is really 5G about? It's not about autonomous car, and we put a letter by engineer Bill Baskett. Engineer Bill Baskett is working for Fiat Chrysler. He is working on the telecommunication systems of autonomous cars. And he wrote you a letter explaining you that 5G is not necessary for autonomous cars. The reason they're telling you is that because you're in the state of Michigan and they know that this is important for you, so they tell you that this is essential. That's what they say. In rural states, they tell them it's for rural areas, while it's not. For cars, industry states like Michigan, they tell you that this is the reason, but no, they're already autonomous cars in the state of Michigan, and they do not work on 5G. So this is a false claim. 5G is about data. The wireless industry got to saturation for making money from connecting people. 1G to 4G are about connecting people. There are no more business because almost everyone has a cell phone. So they need to find ways to make money. And the way to make money is data. Data is the new oil. Why do they need those antennas everywhere? Because they're going to put, and there already are, antennas almost in every device and appliance in our house. They even have antennas in our baby diapers, send a message to the mother when the baby poops. So they're collecting that data, and that is a lot of data. For that, they need bigger bandwidth and a lot more antennas to transfer that data and sell it. And in the documents I provided you, there's a McKinsey report. McKinsey is one of the world leading consultancy firms in the world. And they have a report that this data selling is an industry of between $4 to $11 trillion a year for the wireless industry. That is what 5G is about, selling our data, taking our data and sell it. That's why you need so many antennas in front of almost every home. So back to your question, autonomous cars, they need wireless technologies. They do not need 5G. A lot of them work on satellites and other technologies. But when it's come to autonomous cars, this is also another area where we need to start and work on safer technology. It's time we find safer solutions for wireless. For example, Wi-Fi. That is one more tolerable technology, and probably, is it completely safe? I don't know. Is it safer? Yes. But that is where we should put our investment, in developing safer technologies. And that is a whole beautiful way to make our economy grow. And the thing is, I think if we inform our public, for example, what the NTP study said and showed, and the public know how this is harmful, the public will reduce its usage of this technology, and the public will demand that safer technologies will be developed. And I've been, I came to Michigan, I was supposed to give 5 lectures when I came here. I ended up giving 20 lectures, because with every lecture, people got so convinced and wanted to educate their communities. And once they educated, so many people understand what's causing the sickness. And a lot of people started doing changes in their lifestyle, and they're calling me and telling me and thanking me. So if we would tell the public the truth, and the wireless industry made sure in the past 30 years to lie to the public, if we tell them the truth and inform the public, and the public has a right to be informed, then you'll see that there'll be a much growing demand for it. And if I may say, I think that if public really knew what the 5G is about and what this wireless technology is doing, the public will be here. Many, many people would say, do not vote for 5G. 5G is a power grab by the wireless industry. They already took our right to object this technology based on health effect. Those big bills that they've been pushing every state in the country are very sophisticated legal documents that takes our rights to the public rights away. They want a 5G? Okay, let the municipalities and the people make a decisions if they want it, how much they want it, if they want it in front of the homes. Don't let the wireless industry make the decision for them, and that's what that bill is about. Taking our rights to our public rights of way. You can...
Ms. Tachover,
yeah.
do you, let me ask you 2 questions. Number 1, what was the outcome of your lawsuit against the State of Israel?
We lost the case, and I want to make sure. We won the first case in the terms that we proved the evidence. I can explain in details. We lost the case, but as a result, as I said, we forced the government, while in the case, to put limitations on the use of Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is banned up to the age of 6. It's allowed 1 hour up to the 3rd grade, 1 to 2 hours up to the 6th grade. Wi-Fi has to be turned off at all other times.
In the public schools of the State of Israel, okay. And do you want to allow time for testimony by Mr. Haro and Dr. Zebram?
I think Dr. Zauberman and Professor are here to answer questions. If you have more scientific questions, Professor Wu can be answering it. About the sickness in the state of Michigan, the Dr. Zauberman, he can absolutely answer to that. And I'm sure he has. I know when he talked to me, the stories are just heartbreaking, but also encouraging that once people removing wireless from their home, a lot of the health effects are disappearing.